could definitely argue for a while on this one. There are dozens of potential candidates for most shit-your-pants scary Lord of the Rings moment, such as that scary woman, that scary guy, and that scary lake. I may not have read the books, but my blissful ignorance tells me that they are undoubtedly some of, if not the richest pieces of epic storytelling in fiction. The outstanding level of detail, originality, characterization, world building, and so on is truly breathtaking. And to see a splatter genre filmmaker responsible for these two movies turn this trilogy into a beautiful cinematic masterpiece is the cherry on top. But with all the ass-kissing aside, The Fellowship of the Ring is still the best film in the trilogy. And that's a fact, because this is an essay, and essays always tell the truth. While there is this incredible epicness to the sequels, Fellowship just feels like a much more grounded and intimate experience. You could argue any character is the main protagonist because it is a third-person narrative, but the way I see it, Frodo is the core emotional centerpiece to the story because he becomes the bearer to the catalyst of the conflict. And of all the scenes to demonstrate the dramatic intensity of the story necessary for his character, I still firmly believe the Ringwraiths bring about the most profoundly horrific encounter. And that's a strong opinion when there's a big fucking spider later on. The hunt for the ring serves as what development executive and writer Christopher Vogler describes as the hero's threshold, where our heroes leave the safety of the Shire and begin their trials and tribulations as they journey towards Mount Doom to destroy a custom-made Tiffany ring. But whereas many stories escalate towards conflict and danger, continually stacking the odds against our heroes, in this particular moment, there's a jarring immediacy to the contrast in tone that I feel defines the perilous journey that follows. Sure, we as the audience are already fully aware of Sauron's threat, but Frodo and the lads have yet to experience the tangible severity of the situation, and the best way to do that is to abruptly strip the harmony of the Shire away from them. There's no transition into this strange, untamed wilderness. I mean, they literally fall into it. As a result, it makes the preceding world feel much more real because it shatters this false illusion of safety and security the hobbits were used to, as if they breached some invisible wall. The thing is, the Shire always felt way too eerily artificial and inorganic to me, and honestly, I think the contrast is aesthetically deliberate to reinforce the idea that this was a very bubbled and protected setting, looking to isolate itself away from the dangers of the outside world, which in its own right is a very dangerous concept within itself. In this regard, the stylistic distinction then serves to humanize this sequence of events by demasking the alluring high fantasy and reminding us that this is a real world that functions very much like our own. All this open, finely tamed land is now erosion, dirt, and spiders, and the joyful sing-songs of the local tavern are now characterized by grim distrust and claustrophobia, as if we're figuratively watching kids enter the big bad adult world. It isn't evil that exposes the ignorance and naivety of the hobbits, it's the starkness and occasional cynicism given to these darker, unfamiliar settings. There's horror found in bewilderment, so the hobbits' anxieties feel empathetic, and what the Ringwraiths bring to them is both obscurity and some essence of existentialism, because it makes them question the world they once thought they knew. The Nazgul appear somewhat human and ghostly, and the perception given to them by the hobbits makes them out to be some sort of overwhelming nightmare that ultimately turns out to be kinda tame? We'll come back to that. At this point in the story, we still don't know what they are exactly, but for context, they were once the 9 kings who were each given a ring of power by Sauron, only to be deceived into greed and corruption by the rings before falling under Sauron's control. But even knowing that, it's never fully elaborated upon because ambiguity is good. If you can tolerate it. We know the Nazgul are on their way, yet like when the hobbits suddenly fall into the wilderness, the film still surprises us with their jarring and unsettling arrival. The use of a dolly zoom makes it seem like they just materialized from nowhere, leaving the lasting impression that they're literally everywhere, which becomes even more evident and disorientating when the hobbits race for the Buckleberry Ferry. That sounded weird coming out of my mouth. But the emphasis placed on raw, piercing, diegetic sounds from their horses and armor make them them seem like heavy, powerful men before we've even seen them in combat. And they truly are unnerving. They never tire, they never stop, and a big factor to their presence is the attention given to their movements. Despite the fact that much of their appearance is in slow motion, they still move with immense speed and aggression that really heightens their sense of power, especially when they storm through the inn like bullets shooting towards their target. They're totally unfazed by everything. I don't feel there's another threat that comes close to this dynamic later in the story because of the push towards upscaled action-oriented scenes where the animation just looks a little too floaty at times to feel threatened by. The Nazgul are fiercely determined to find the ring regardless of who wears it. No sympathy, reason, or manner of plea. They are the raw, shadowy manifestation of pure, unstoppable evil that with the added focus on bugs makes them look like they carry some sort of plague of decay with them. Except this obscurity and sense of power is just a smokescreen. At this point in the story, we're still in the mindset of Frodo and his unknowingness to the evil that lurks beyond the Shire. So from that subjective perspective, we're just as ill-equipped and overwhelmed by the Nazgul, despite the fact that they technically turn out to be, cowards in comparison to what comes next. I'm not going to dispute them as necessarily weak, but the Nazgul depend entirely on the circumstances that surround them. They're more on the defensive side of combat than going in guns blazing because eventually Strider and Arwen are able to scare them off by calling their bluff. Which in turn, given the intensity of the Nazgul atmospherically and emotionally towards the hobbits, establishes the strength of Strider and Arwen's characters in the process. There's actually this really haunting line in Tolkien's criticism towards the film treatment that existed in 1958 that describes the Nazgul's danger as almost entirely due to the unreasoning fear which they inspire, like ghosts. They have no great physical power against the fearless, but what they have, and the fear that they inspire, is enormously increased in darkness. I love this line purely because of how it describes the dynamic between the Nazgul and the hobbits, and what Strider brings to the conflict at Weathertop. Despite all this intimidation, Strider is completely fearless of them, bringing a similar speed, power, and determination through the same stylization as the Nazgul, and what the Nazgul become are a negative subversion to the Shire. Whereas the Shire is a smokescreen for the danger of the outside world, the Nazgul are a symbolic smokescreen for the weaknesses and insecurities that every single character in the story possess, including the most powerful threat of all. By literally weaponizing their obscurity and exposing their vulnerability in the process, the story is able to take that first tangible experience of danger the hobbits are faced with, and use it to strengthen them to withstand the more challenging dangers that follow. The Nazgul eventually become overshadowed by harrowing encounters like the Watcher in the Water, the Troll, the Balrog, Lurtz, and Sean Bean's inevitable death. These once dangerous domineering shadows of death essentially turn out to be pawns in a much more significant conflict that retrospectively weakens them. It's like leveling up your character in a difficult RPG. At first the simplest enemies pose an actual threat, and then by level 50, meh. They're like a rite of passage, and they represent an amalgamation of everything to come. There's something so unforgivable and vicious about them, yet as the story builds them up like giants only to dismantle them in the hands of our experienced heroes, you start to brush them off as just another enemy prone to the same cowardice as any man. They're more about character development than being purely another obstacle. They're like a form of realization that hope exists when you demask your fears and embrace them, much like the strange, unfamiliar world the hobbits fall into. And at the end of it all, screw New Zealand and their spiders. Ugh. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below what your favourite Lord of the Rings moment is. I'm very curious to know. I expect the comments to be flooded with how to pronounce the word Zoran, the guy from... Try not to say the guy from Power Rangers. As always, if you want to support the show, get early access, and vote on future videos, you can do so by supporting me over on Patreon. Big shout out to Riley Peterson for correcting me, because dyslexia got the better of me and I spelled your name wrong in the credits. We're corrected that now. And if you like the shenanigans I get up to, you can follow me on Twitter. And yeah, I'm also on Instagram if you want to see photos of my dog. Yeah. Stay safe, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye. It's been a long week.